We've already met in executive session, and we did the salute to the flag in there. So at this point, we're going to do the roll call. Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Byrne?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mrs. Korn?
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Here.
Mr. Markarian?
Here.
Mr. Syatt?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you. I just want to point out the statement of public notice to people in the audience in your agendas. This meeting was advertised as per the law. We have public input twice during our board meetings. The first time is public input on agenda items, when you are welcome to come up and give us your comments or questions about anything that's listed on the agenda for tonight, or that's in the presentations that we're going to get at the beginning of the meeting. Later in the meeting, there's public comment on non-agenda items, where you're welcome to come up and talk about anything of your interest. Also wanted to point out that the meeting is being recorded. Okay. So at this point, we're up to our student government representative, Jimmy.
So just a quick question. Any issues I raise here, are they discussed like immediately, or do they go, I guess, with like public comment, or like are they discussed later, I guess is the question.
Wait, which are the issues that
Just like anything like I bring up here.
you bring up?
Yeah.
It depends what it is.
Okay, so it seems like the list of things I have to talk about has grown, thankfully, as the school year goes on. Well, thankfully, I guess, in terms of things we can receive feedback on. So we'll start out by saying that the homecoming game went really, really well. We quote-unquote flattened Franklin with a pretty dominant performance. Our pep rally, we got a lot of improved feedback over last year, and then our homecoming dance on Saturday was also pretty well received. So the giant mess for student government that was Spirit Week leading into the pep rally game and dance, I think went pretty smoothly, so I'm grateful for that. Last week, as part of the Week of Respect, we had a speaker come in, a motivational speaker. I know some Ridge faculty are in the audience, and I was hoping to speak to them later, so I guess they can hear some of the student feedback now. I would say that overall, the reception to the speaker was pretty negative in terms of how he's perceived by most of the Ridge students. Again, I can't speak for everyone, but I guess that's certainly something that people asked me to bring up in terms of how they felt, I guess, the messages that they were being shared from the motivational speaker. And then the last thing that a lot of people have been mentioning to me is the quality and availability of food in the cafeteria. So this has kind of been an issue all 4 years I've been at Ridge. People have always, asked me about changes to the cafeteria, policies, food, so on and so forth. Especially with like prices, a lack of options with when they close the vending machines and so on and so forth. I know it's not an easy position, I guess, as a district or as a school to be negotiating with like a giant food provider like Aramark, but I definitely wanted to share that there is a general consensus of unhappiness with the food service at Ridge, and I would like to know, I guess, if there's anything that the students can do to have a greater say in how their food is served. I know that's a difficult position for everyone, but also something I felt like sharing. So those are my updates for the past month or so.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the input that you brought, I know there are a lot of staff members here, so I'm sure that they heard that. Did you want to say something, Jen?
I might have missed the motivational speaker thing. What? Is that what you're talking about? What was the
The
person's
assembly that they had at school.
assembly?
Yeah.
It was just, is there like a name?
The speaker is Nick Tokman. I know...
Nick who?
Nick Tokman.
Topin?
Tokman. Yeah, he was on Deadliest Catch.
Oh, Deadliest
Yeah.
Catch.
Yeah, so I know...
What was the problem?
I would say that a lot of people felt as if his ideals were kind of, like his message was you should pursue your dreams because it's the only way in which you can fully, contribute your maximum potential to society. Some people interpret that as saying that, if you don't have the means to pursue your privilege, then you aren't doing it right. So it did feel as if, it was coming from a place of privilege. Again, I want to separate like my personal opinions on it from that of like the general student body, but I seem to see, like, it seems that most people were generally feeling as if, it didn't really resonate with them because they felt as if he wasn't cognizant enough of his own privileges and opportunities in order to fully connect with everybody else in a meaningful way, that made them, feel humbled and feel as if they would be able to like contribute to society as well in a way that wasn't becoming a fisherman in Alaska.
Okay.
Can
Go
I just
ahead.
make a comment? I just want to sort of echo what Jimmy is saying, and that every high school senior that I spoke to, and I have a senior, overwhelmingly said what Jimmy said in one form or fashion, and they didn't appreciate it at all. I don't think we got the desired outcome for it.
Right. Yeah, I did hear some feedback like that too. But, okay, as far as the food, I know that there's been input processes for getting, ideas and suggestions for Aramark in the past. I don't know what the best suggestion is, at this time of the year. You know what I mean? What do you think?
So what I think is that we need to put these ideas into the competitive bidding process, meaning that the next time we go to bid with Aramark is soon. I think we're doing it. Yeah, we're working on a draft right now for this year, right, for next year's food service program. So, right, so one of the things we asked specifically to include is some requirements for the food service company to meet with students, to hold meetings with students to find out about how they perceive the program to be running, what ideas that they have for menu items and things of that nature. So I think that's the best way to obligate whomever it is, regardless of who the successful bidder is, to try to be more responsive to what the students would like to see happen in the cafeteria. So we're aware of the issue, and we're making it part of the process as we look for food service providers in the next contract, which is being bid out this year.
I will mention, I guess, that last year, as part of the junior class student government, we did meet with representatives of Aramark, and frankly, the answers they gave were pretty non-answers, vague, avoided the question. But I appreciate, I guess, the input that's going into the bidding process for next year, and I really hope you, get the student feedback as you go through that bidding process, so that we have some sort of, I guess, voice in the contract itself, which, again, I know is difficult, but
Right.
I think the food issue is something that affects almost every student, and it's one that they've been very, very vocal about.
Right. I think one of the things you have to keep in mind, too, is in terms of cost, and sometimes when you're perhaps looking for certain menu options or certain food items, that it can have a significant impact on what those menu items cost. And so when we're trying to provide a food service program at a reasonable cost, that can be a factor. So we're trying to figure out some ways that within the contract there can be possibilities for menu items that might be significantly more expensive than what you typically see right now. So that's part of the conversation for how to make that happen.
And I guess I just asked then, if you guys are going through that process this year, that perhaps you'll include it, I guess, in a venue that's accessible to students, so I guess that they can know that this is the action that the board is taking on this end, and I guess perhaps if they want to share their voice, that they'll have an opportunity to do so in terms of how the bidding process goes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
I just have a question in terms of
Yeah.
the food. So I know one of the issues has always been, by the time you get to 8th period, there's nothing left. And I know the contract does have that the vending machines aren't open during the lunch periods, because a lot of that stuff is sold in the cafeteria. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful if for 8th period, there could be access to the vending machines once they run out of all the stuff that the kids are looking to get.
You have to turn your mic on, Rod.
Yeah.
I think all of this could change by September of 2021, because you're going to be
Right.
dealing, well, one more school year in terms of the service, yeah.
Yeah.
And we may be, we're probably going to be dealing with we will be out to bid. The bid already has provisions for, and we can ask for it again now, and I think to Jimmy's point, the issue is how responsive Aramark is to the meetings with the students, because in the end, they need to meet with the students. They do have a new regional manager, John McLaughlin, no relation, he spells it differently, just to be clear, who was brought in, just in case, who was brought in because of his culinary expertise purportedly. So I don't know if he's met with the staff, but it is one of the things that specifically I asked when Nick and I met with our educational consultant, or excuse me, our food service consultant, who is Bill Gerichter from Advocate, that who helps us to manage that program. If we could see that John, in particular, was present at some of these meetings. I think a lot of these meetings have been just between the district food service manager, Mr. Tartabono, and the students, and there's been a little bit of a disconnect there with some of follow-through, I think. Mr. McLaughlin may be more inclined to try to follow through, and we did specifically work on putting provisions in the request for proposal, because there's no guarantee that it'll be Aramark when we go out to bid for next year. We're going out to bid now because next year we have to have a new series of contracts. Normally we go out to bid with the option to renew for up to 5 years because that's cost effective for us. But that provision in this request for proposal is expanded in terms of the kinds and numbers of meetings we want them to have with staff and with parents, and also for the ability to provide, and students, and the ability to provide, an enhanced level of food options. Obviously, that's at a cost to provide, because you're talking about producing hundreds of thousands of meals a year when you look at the individual components and how they break down and the number of students that we have. But there'd be a cost for that, but,
No.
presuming
Well,
that
and
people
maybe-
are willing to pay for it, then it'll be there.
I mean, maybe an opportunity to put some pressure on Aramark if they can't deliver what we need, like having lunches available at period 8, then maybe we have to do it with somebody else.
Well, that's why the competitive bidding process is designed in such a way that we use an evaluative set of criteria that are pre-disclosed. It's not just the lowest price.
I mean, I think there's two issues with the food and what the kids would like to see. I mean, part of it is related to cost, because some of the items that people might want would be more costly, but there's some things that to me seem kind of like a simple ask, like more vegetarian food, for example, which isn't super expensive. So there has been a lot of feedback from students, even up at the elementary schools, asking for more vegetarian food. So that doesn't seem like something that should be so difficult to do. Okay. Okay, at this point, we're going to go down below. We have board presentations, so the board members are going to move down there.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to present the performance results of the 2019 spring administration of the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment. There's going to be a lot of information and a lot of data, so I want to make sure you know now that you don't have to take notes. This will be posted on the district website by tomorrow. Where's that going? It is not going. I think I'm manual. Okay, so just a couple of introductory points that I want to start with. This last year, the state decided to change the name of PARC to NJSLA. All right, but it's the 5th year of implementing the new state assessment that started with PARC. So PARC for 4 years, NJSLA, same basic assessment, same assessment, but 2 different names. What you'll see is that our overall results are good and consistent, very good in fact, as they remain consistently high. We do see an increase in our student participation rates in the last couple of years. And one new change I wanted to make you aware of is that we are providing the individual student reports via the parent portal in Genesis going forward. So on September 20th, those were loaded into the document portion of the portal, and parents were notified that that's where you would get your individual student report. When you download that document, you will also find a link to the New Jersey DOE site where you can get more information about your child's performance from the DOE that they provide. All right, so I'm going to start with English Language Arts, but in each area, ELA and math, there are 6 items that I will cover. The performance of the students on the assessments by grade band, by cohort, and by school, our participation rates, our comparison to the state on these assessments, and our subgroup performances. So in ELA, as I said earlier, we continue to outperform the state in the attainment of levels 4 and 5 from our students. Notably, this year, we marked our highest achievements earning 4 and 5 in grades 7, 9, and 10. We also see increases in our subgroups of our economically disadvantaged students as well as our students with disabilities. And our elementary schools all outperform the state. All right, so for the data, there's 4 data slides per area. On this chart, you see the district level outcomes for the 5th year of the NJSLA assessment in each of the grade levels and courses for ELA, language arts, and literacy. You can see how our school district performed compared with the state results as well as our participation rates. The different columns represent the percentages of students who achieve at each performance level. As an example, in grade 3, there were 353 valid test scores. 4.5% of the students earned a level 1, 9.6% a level 2, 22.1% a level 3, 53% a level 4, 10.8% a level 5. So students earning a 4 or 5 in grade 3, 63.7%, compared to the state earning a 4 or 5 of 50.2%. And you see that our participation rate was 97% on that assessment. As you can see, in all grades, 3 through 10, we well outperformed the state in levels 4 and 5 of achievement. Note that grade 11 is not reported because last year, for the first time, juniors were not required to take the assessment. All right, so this chart shows a comparison of the spring 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019 PARC and then NJSLA administrations of the ELA, English Language Arts Literacy Assessment. The percentages shown represent the percentage of students who achieved a 4 and a 5 in each administration year. The last column on the right highlights the percentage change from 18 to 19. For example, in grade 3 in 2015, 71.7% of the students achieved a 4 or a 5. 71.9% achieved a level 4 or 5 in 2016, 73% in 2017, 70% in 2018, and 63.7% of students achieved a 4 or 5 in 2019. Looking at each grade level from left to right, you will see the performance results for the grade band. This represents a different group of students each year taking essentially the same test. And then in the last column, it is the percentage of students who earned a 4 or 5 from last year to this year in that grade level. So some things I want to point out about this data. First, if you look at grade 10 and our performance level across all 5 years, there is some fluctuation that could be attributed to the change in our participation rates over the years. That grade 10, the high school in particular, had low participation rates for a few of those years and were in flux. So in grade 10, for example, in 2015, we had a 40% participation rate. In 2016, it was 47%. 2017, it was 25%. Last year, it went to 86.7%, and this year it's 85.8%. So it's difficult to reach too many conclusions with that fluctuation. In addition to how each grade level performed over the 5 years, if you follow the diagonals like this across of the chart as highlighted, you can compare how students in the same graduating class performed from year to year. So a few things. Since the inception of the test in 2015, the trend is for improvements from third grade over time. For example, if you start in 2015 with that third grade class, it improved when they went to fourth grade to 78%, and when they went to fifth grade to 85%, a dip in sixth grade to 83%, and then another increase in seventh grade last year to 88%. So the trend over time is for increases. Similarly, when you look just at the third grade band, right, from last year to this year, you see a 6.3% decline. But when you look at the fourth grade, when they were in third grade, it was 70%. They increased by 7% to 77% achievement. So you need to look at the data in two different ways. The performance of the grade level over time, but also the cohort is really important in how they do over time. Some of the things we attribute to this increase in this trend is that in third grade, there's a limited exposure to technology by the time they're taking that first assessment in third grade fully on a computer, as well as the fact that in ELA, they are given different types of writing. Each student might have a different type of writing that is factored into their score, as well as curriculum revisions we've made along the way, adjusting to the data that we see. So where we see the student performance dips from one grade to the next, like I pointed out from grade 5 to grade 6, grade 5 to grade 6, is where we can look at the evidence statements and do the item analysis and look for curricular gaps that we might see in a given grade level and address those with curriculum writing or with the staff. There's another cohort to look at. So this is the subgroup slide, and this chart shows our subgroup outcomes for the 2019 school year for the NJSLA and ELA. Required by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the minimum group size for reporting is 20 in order to protect student privacy. So where you see the asterisks, we have fewer than 20 students, and so that information is not reported. The second column from the left represents the number of valid test scores in each subgroup this past 2019 administration. The percentiles shown are also an aggregate data for each subgroup from grades 3 through 11. So this is all of the students in each subgroup from grades 3 through 11 and their proficiency levels. The second to last column from the right in the chart represents the percentage of student in each subgroup who earned a 4 or a 5 this past year. The last column shows the percentage change from last year to this year. As indicated in the last column, each subgroup either maintained or grew in their achievement level from last year, except for two, the Hispanic and the ELL subgroups. For the ELL subgroup performance, I'll speak about that in a later slide. We do see significant growth in our students with disability subgroup of 10%. So So the last chart for ELA is the performance by building and by grade for ELA. In addition, the second row highlights the overall district performance for each assessment, so combined for the entire grade level. When you look at the building performance at each grade level, you can see that while the starting point in grade 3 is varied significantly across the buildings, that they're relatively close together by the time they finish 5th grade. So some areas warranting further exploration in ELA. After looking at the test results, some things we've identified include to continue to look at the performance of Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, and special education subgroups, including the ELL students. We continue to target interventions toward our ELL subgroup in these 2 ways. So we promote sheltered English instruction training for the staff throughout the district to promote to support students in class who are ELL, English language learners. And we also implemented a new course at the high school for English language learners called Integrated Topics to support them in their academics, particularly at the high school. We are also looking to analyze by item the evidence statements associated with the assessments so that we can focus professional development and curriculum writing where we see gaps. Okay, mathematics. Similarly, we continue to outperform the state in our percentage of levels 4 and 5. Notably, this year marks the highest achievement we had in levels 4 and 5 in Math 7. Keep in mind that in Math 7, it doesn't include any students who were enrolled in Algebra 1. So that would be all the students who took the grade 7 math assessment and not the Algebra 1 assessment. There was also notable growth in our Math 8 performance from last year, which I'll show you in the data slides. So this slide shows, similarly to ELA, right, our participation rate on the left, our performance levels at each grade and in each course, and our comparison to the state. Again, like with ELA, our participation rates are up this year. The lowest you see is in Algebra 2 of 88%. And again, the juniors weren't required to take the test, so that may have factored in, although our juniors do take a variety of different math assessments. But that was the lowest participation rate. So you see how we performed against the state in each grade level and in each course. As an example, right, in grade 3, we had, again, 354 valid test scores with a 97% participation rate. And this shows their performance at a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, a level 4, and a level 5. 4 and 5 are meeting and exceeding expectations. So the district performance of students who met or exceeded expectations is 79.7% compared to 55% at the state level. We'll look a little bit at grade 8 on the next slide. But you'll note there might be we might have some concern for our gap between the high school and the middle school Algebra 1 results and the overall Algebra 1 results at the high school, so it's an area that we will be focusing on. This chart shows again the comparison of the scores from 2015, 16, 17, 18, and now 19. The percentage shown represents the percentage of students who achieved a 4 or a 5 in each administration year. The last column on the right highlights the percentage changes from 17 to 18. So again, in grade 3, you see that across the grades, we went from a 79.6% of students earning a 4 or a 5 to 82%, to 80.1%, 79.8%, and 79.7% this past year, with the change of negative 0.1%. Students starting in math, it's a little different than ELA. Students in grade 7, the entire grade level does not take the same assessment. For example, in grade 8, you'll see there are 3 different assessments students can take: Math 8, Algebra 1, or Geometry, depending on the course they're in. The level 4 and 5 performance is outlined for these 3 courses for the past 2 years. Additionally, the total percentage of grade 8 students as a whole is shown and denoted where it says 8th grade. So where we're breaking out the students in Math 8 this year scored a 4 or a 5, 38.7% of them. 97% scored a 4 or 5 in the algebra course, 100% in the geometry course, and 79.6 overall when you combine all three of the courses. So our performance level in grade 8 is consistent with what it's been if you look across their cohort. Let you think about that for a second. Math is confusing. So this year marks our highest achievement of 4 and 5 in grade 7 in all 5 years of administration. And we do see an increase in grade 8 from 27.7% to 38.7%. So that's a significant increase as well. Overall, our grades 3 through 6 data stayed largely the same. In addition, you can follow the diagonals of this chart and look at the cohorts to compare how they did in the same graduating class year over year. Several graduating classes, including last year's grade 4, see an increase in performance from the previous year. So similarly, here's our subgroup data across all grades of the district, subgroups of students where there's 20 or more students. And you'll notice the similar results where they are performed about the same in all subgroups, except a notable decline in the ELL performance, which I will speak about when I report on their achievement on a different assessment. Similar to ELL, these results are very similar, where you see in these grade level reports mirror what I've shown you in the other slides, but it's broken out by buildings, and you see that where the students start out lower in 3rd grade here, they're evened out by 5th grade before they go to the middle school. So areas warranting further exploration in mathematics would be to look at those subgroups where we see the declines, the Hispanics, the economically disadvantaged, the ELLs, and some of the special education subgroups, to look at the grade 8 math, which continues to be lower performing, and the algebra 1 at Ridge High School. We continue to support ELLs in mathematics as well in the same ways I described with ELA, and we plan to look at the evidence statements and look for gaps that we can fill in our curriculum in any of these areas where we've seen declines. So there's not a lot to say about science testing. Last year, the new standards were implemented fully in 2017. Last year, our students participated in a field test for the science assessment, where there were no results shared. This year, our students took the science assessment in grades 5, 8, and 11, and we are told that performance reports will be made available this winter. Okay. So I said I would speak about ELLs, English Language Learners. So Access for ELLs. Access for ELLs is an assessment given to our English language learners annually. It stands for Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English. It is administered K-12 to any students who are identified as ELLs, English Language Learners. We use it to monitor their progress from year to year and consider when they're ready to be exited from the program. It meets federal requirements for monitoring and reporting their progress. It is anchored to the WIDA ELA standards, English Language Development Standards. It's a national consortium. I actually looked up what it stood for, and I didn't bring it with me. Mrs. Stotler? Yeah. Yeah. But it's what it's the federally, yeah. So it's what we use to monitor English language learner development across the 4 domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And the students are measured on this scale: entering, emerging, developing, expanding, bridging, and reaching. So I'm dividing this into K-5 and 6-12, so you can see our total number of students. K-5 who took the assessment, if you add these up, there are 46 students who took ELA. No, I'm sorry, 36 who took ELA and 46 who took math. When students are new entrants to the country. They have a year where they do not have to take the ELA assessment. So 10 were exempt last year. But this tells you what level those students scored at in the spring. So 18% of the students K-5 were at a level 1 entering, 18% at a level 2, and so on. 31.8% at a level 3, 25% at a 4, 6.8% at a 5, and 0% at a 6. So for exiting ELL, students need to be at a 4.5. 612, there's a smaller amount of students total, but they're similar results, right? There are no students who are reaching, 38% who are bridging, 14% who are expanding, 3% developing, 4.8% emerging, and 28.6% entering. It's difficult to make direct comparisons between these results and how the students performed on the NJSLA assessment for a couple of reasons. One, I told you some students are exempt from the ELA exam in their first year. But we also, there's really 3 reasons I think that it's challenging. This is a transient population, so the number of students we have in the district varies from year to year. So the students taking the assessment changes from year to year. So we can't really do a cohort comparison. The number of students in total is very small, as you see. So they don't all take the NJSLA assessment. And so you can't compare these results, but what you can see is that their proficiency in English would certainly impact their ability to perform on the NJSLA exam. One more assessment, dynamic learning maps. 1.7% of our population roughly takes this assessment every year. These are our students with the most significant learning needs. They are determined eligible to take the DLM by the Child Study Team based on their individual learning needs or ability. It's the smallest percentage of our students who are not able to participate in state testing. The assessment itself is linked to grade level standards, but it's brought down to the student's ability level during testing so they can demonstrate their progress and their understanding of their skill progression. So they are scored, if you will, across emerging, approaching target, at target, and advanced target. And the students are not compared against to each other. And so there is little that we can do in analyzing sort of how the students are doing across time because they are compared really against themselves and their own individual needs. So NJSLA testing and requirements for this year. To make you aware, the testing calendar is linked to the district website. It's also linked here, so you can go directly there where it says link here. But on the curriculum page, there is a link to the district testing calendar. And so these are the testing windows for this coming spring in all grades, including science. And the last thing I'll speak about is the graduation requirement, which for now is as follows. What it said last year hasn't changed for the current seniors, juniors, or sophomores. And so basically, those students in those 3 grades can meet the graduation requirement 3 different ways. With a score on the PARCC assessment meeting one of the other scores that meets the graduation requirement, or a third pathway is through a portfolio appeal if they don't meet it in any other way. So those benchmarks are here for each grade level, or each alternative assessment. Going forward for the class of 2023 and beyond, the state is considering a proposal right now. They have until November 9th, I believe, to vote on it and pass it, otherwise they will be starting over. But they have made a proposal for what that graduation requirement will be for the current freshman class going forward. But we're going to hold off on speaking about that until they make a decision because we think it might not be worth engaging in until there's a formal decision made by the state. But it is pending. This also provides you with some links to some resources for if you want to learn more about NJSLA and PARCC. Are there any questions from board members?
So in the beginning, you were talking about the tests, when you said increases incur with our economically disadvantaged students and students with disabilities.
The test.
like the ELL. I mean, the English Language Arts, ELA. But then the tests aren't modified for the students with disabilities, right?
No.
Besides the last
Well,
one, you show like the kids are
tests are
taking.
not modified.
Not at all.
So you're talking about ELL, that
No,
subject?
I'm sorry, the English Language Arts,
ELA.
ELA.
So
I was just curious. I
are
didn't
there
think
any
were
modifications made?
for the students with disabilities?
Okay. Students through their IEP may have modifications,
All right, and then they did better. Okay, and then,
like extended time, small group instruction. There are modifications through an individual education plan for individual students.
okay, and then my other question was, it's really hard to compare the different years because the test changed every year, didn't it? Since it came out, it has changed, I think, every single year.
I don't think it's changed in any significant way at all.
Well, I mean, it was like two
You're
weeks.
talking about from being renamed, or you're talking
No,
about
like, I
since
mean, like the
2015?
time, first it was like, what, it's not the same test every year, it was a different, like 2015, I think it was like,
Could you speak to that? Because I don't believe it's changed notably. Right.
but it got shorter, right?
It did get shorter after the first year.
And then it never shortened again, didn't it shorten twice? So it's valid to compare them
It
all
is.
the years?
Especially from 2016.
Okay. And then, I mean, also, this test was given last April, right?
May,
April and May, and it just came out now,
right.
which is another issue. I mean, I'm not going to be a fan of it, so I'm not, I don't have anything good to say. So sorry. The test itself, I think, is ridiculous, but, and then, when they talk about your English language learners taking a test in a language that they don't speak, it seems unfair and ridiculous. Like, they make them take it at all because they're just learning. So they take math, so they have word problems in English that they have to take that they can't read. So that probably hinders them a little bit, I would think. I don't know, it's just frustrating that we're still doing this, that's all.
I hear you.
So,
Can you explain the row Math 8? What are the percentages there?
This one,
Yeah.
can I explain the row? What are
Like,
the
how did we arrive? I understand the single block percentages for 2015,
So only for
2016.
the last 2 years did we break it out for you, because we hadn't done this before.
Right, but
So
how-
Math 8 performance, when you look at 15, 16, and 17, are just the students who took Math 8.
Okay, that's fine.
And that's
So-
their achievement on Math 8, at 24.6% and then 34%. But for 18 and 19, we broke it out to show you also how they did across the entire grade level, right? So we put, on Math 8, the students got a 4 or 5 at the percentage of 27.7 of the students who took Math 8. They got a 4 or 5. 27.7% of them got a 4 or a 5.
Okay.
And then under here,
Yeah.
right. So the students who took Algebra 1 got a 4 or a 5. 97.9% of them got a 4 or a 5.
Oh, those are all individual. The 27.7 is not somehow tied to the other percentages?
No,
Okay,
the
I
bottom
understand.
number is, right, so I figured I might confuse you a little bit, but Math
Yes.
8 students, right, this is the test that the students in the course Math 8
Right,
take,
okay.
right? There are 8th graders who take Algebra 1. 97.9% of the 8th graders who took Algebra 1 scored a 4 or a 5. And then
Right, yes.
98.3% of the 8th
Yep.
graders who took geometry got a 4 or a 5. And then we combined them all to show you that across the entire 8th grade, they got a 4 or a 5. 79.9% of them got a 4 or a 5 in any one of the 3 tests,
Right, in the test that they were taking.
in the test that they were
Okay,
taking.
got it.
And we did the same thing for this year.
Yes, okay. For the ELL students on the slide that says access for ELLs grades K through 5, we'll start with that. I understand it's a transient population and there's a very small number, but are we, is this data anonymized that we get back, or can we track within our district the kids that are like moving? So like, can we look at the diagonals from number 1 K through 5? I know this is 2019, but do we have that similar data?
This is the first year we're reporting on this data, so we don't have the historical record of it, but Mrs. Stotler does that, like, every day as part of her job, and she's here to speak to that.
Yeah, we get that data, they've been giving the test for years, it's a requirement for the state. So we have the data, we do absolutely track every student. And as a district, we are supposed to actually continue to monitor them 4 years after they've exited the program to make sure that they were properly exited and that we're continuing to support them in the classroom. It's just because they reached that 4.5 expanding bridging level doesn't mean that they are now the most fluent learners because of the cultural backgrounds, the content that they may not be aware of, and the linguistic proficiency as well. But we absolutely are ESL teachers, the whole staff, we look at all of our students' data over the summer. The reports that we get are broken down by the strands of the standards, which are academic, language, and science, math, social studies, English, and social language. So we really have an awareness of where our kids struggle, and then we tailor the instruction the next year in certain gaps. When we started looking at the data around, I want to say 2013 or 14, we started really honing in on it. We noticed that science was an area that was very difficult for our students on the access test. There's a science section. So we made a point, we have a new textbook series that we're kind of feeding in that addresses all of those gaps. So there are science units now that we're doing. I actually observed an ESL class on Friday, or I don't know what day it is, on Friday, and the whole lesson was on is a science experiment, an ESL class, because we were trying to support the second grade curriculum. So we're definitely monitoring each student. It's not
So when the kids exit from the program, do we still have like a tab on them for how they're going to do the next administration of NJSL, whatever?
NJSLA.
NJSLA?
Well, we're monitoring, our population is small, so we're fortunate that we are looking at every single kid. And in Genesis, we have an alert that allows teachers to know what year post-ESL they're in.
Oh, okay.
So we're absolutely monitoring for these 4 years and how they're doing and making sure they have their schools.
Great.
Even when they're exited.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Oh.
I believe that academics is the primary function of the school district. And we can worry about sports, and we can worry about the chorus and plays and all, but are we achieving the academic performance that we're after? It's the most important measure, I think, of how we're doing. It should be the focus of the board and the staff and everyone else. We don't have any information at all to compare Bernards Township with the best districts in the state. I want to know how we're doing against Milburn, how we're doing against Princeton. There's no information at all. The state reference is meaningless, absolutely meaningless, because if we're not outperforming the state, we better shut down the school because, and hire a whole bunch of new teachers, because it's a meaningless reference.
So I think you've asked this in previous years, and we don't have access to other district information at this time. Each district gets their own information, and we're required to report it out in a certain time frame to the public. It becomes public in the winter when the full performance reports are released, and that's when we can look at how we compare to other districts.
Okay, I want to know how we're doing against Milburn and Princeton and the other.
You'll have to come to the board meeting in February.
Maybe I will. But we
And ask
were
Yes.
approaching number 10,
Sure.
and this report shows us nothing. And part of that is the state doesn't want to, reward the great districts. It wants to, everybody's doing a great job, we're all doing this, and they lost the data. The significance of this is the primary purpose of why we're here, and it's a waste of time what the state is doing. Now, what we ought to be doing, and you probably are, but strengths and weaknesses, and the strengths, you try and make sure that we expand those, but the weaknesses, you have to fix things. And again, I saw a couple classes that the third grade, I think, in the language arts looked like it was going downhill. Now, maybe you can explain why, but the focus of the board, the focus of everyone here, Teachers, the staff, the administration should be trying to get the best education, and I don't sense that's the major focus of
Well, I would
this
tell you that it is
task
all of
review.
our focus. That's why they're out here tonight to support us. And I would tell you that, like in third grade, you bring up, that is an area that we're looking at. And that is the first year when we have state data for those students. We don't know where they started last year. So we get them and we test them at the end of third grade, and then have to make adjustments based on what they present, how they do. And what I pointed out is that by the end of fifth grade, they are close to even across the 4 buildings and at the grade level.
Well,
So that's kind of what we're looking at.
I'm just saying, the state test and the review of this, I think is totally meaningless until we get comparative data. And there's no bows. Let's get the comparative data and then
Okay.
do the same report in much more detail and corrective action.
Anybody else? Board members? Okay. Thank you. Let me switch over.
Okay, so thank you to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Ms. Fox. Thank you very much. And thank you to many of your staff that came out to support you and help you put together that information. I know that Ms. O'Connell helped with the DLM data. Ms. Stotler, thank you for helping us with the ELL information. I know Mr. Colmer is here as well, and he has a lot of experience with state testing and has really been super in helping us analyze and look at our data. So thank you for being here as well. So we had a lot of folks chipping in on that, so I appreciate the work you guys put into that. Thank you for doing it. We wanted to talk a little bit about the Ridge High School mock schedule update. And I see a few unfamiliar faces this evening in the audience. So I just wanted to kind of take a minute to talk a little bit about what this next presentation is about. I wanted to thank Mr. Kraus and Mr. Fackelman for being here this evening. Mr. Kraus is the high school principal. Mr. Fackelman is the supervisor of fine and practical arts, and they have taken a lot of initiative to work on what you can see behind me is titled the Ridge High School Mock Schedule Update. So just to frame this for you a little bit to help you understand what this presentation is about, I want to just give you a little bit of history. Over the last several years, our school district, in particular at the high school level, has been talking about the master schedule. For those of you that have been coming to board meetings for several years, you probably remember different administrators, myself or Mr. Howlett, at one point in time or another talking about different options for the master schedule at Ridge High School. And our area of focus has really kind of come down to two types of master schedules, and we've really emphasized one the most, really. So there's two. One is the rotating drop master schedule, which is the one that the gentleman that came to present tonight, Mr. Kraus and Mr. Fackelman, have worked on. And in the rotating drop schedule, the unique thing, and probably the most significant thing to recognize, is that the students are scheduling 8 periods in their day plus a lunch period, for a total of 9 periods being scheduled in their day. That's the same thing that happens at Ridge High School right now. The students schedule 8 periods of classes in their day. They may have study halls mixed in there, but they schedule 8 periods in their day, plus they have a period for lunch. So it's also 9 periods. The unique thing that is particular to moving to a rotating drop schedule is that in this type of schedule, when the students schedule their 8 periods, there are only 8 periods in the master schedule to schedule their classes, because we don't have students taking classes during the lunch period. So that's a significant difference, okay? Right now at Ridge High School, there's a 9-period day, students might be scheduling classes any one of those 9 periods. So if you think about all the different sections of language arts and Spanish and mathematics and physical education, all those sections of classes and all the classrooms are able to be used throughout the 9 periods of the day, right? Because classes are scheduled in classrooms all 9 periods. When you switch to this type of schedule, okay, you're not scheduling anything during what we call unit lunch. So that's 1 less period out of the 9 that you're able to schedule classes. So now if you think about it, all the classes that we're running in 9 periods right now at Ridge High School have to get scheduled into 8 opportunities in this new type of schedule, right? So you have 9 pounds of potatoes that you're going to put into an 8-pound bag. So that becomes a big challenge in a school that is really full with the 9 pounds of potatoes, meaning all day long, all 9 periods, lots and lots of classrooms are full with lots of classes. So where are you going to put all those classes when you still want to run the same number of classes, but you want to do it in 8 opportunities instead of in 9 opportunities, okay? So that's a significant challenge, and it's one that we've been thinking about for quite a while. And we anticipated that in order to make that happen, we're probably going to need a little bit more space in the school. We also anticipated that since we'd only be running 1 unit lunch, where we need to feed all of the students, we were going to have more capacity to produce more food in a shorter period of time and serve it to the students. So over the years, we have been fortunate enough to be able to accumulate some funds in cap reserve a little bit every year. This is something that all school districts try to do, and school districts that are in a good financial position are able to save a little bit of money every year and put that money into reserves for all kinds of things. Some school districts put money into cap reserve for capital projects. Some school districts put money into legal reserves because they anticipate having legal fees and they want to have a way to absorb that. Some school districts put money into special reserves for things like health benefits, etc. We also look at maintenance reserves. Lots of school districts at the end of every year will say, hey, do we have a little bit of money we could put into a maintenance reserve so that if we have a maintenance project and we need to repair something, there's a place to go to take care of that. So in anticipation of this possibility, over the years, that's something the school district has done, is try to look at the end of each year, every June. If you look at the Board of Ed agenda in June, you'll see what the school district has approved to try to do for reserves at the end of the school year. If there's a little bit of money left over at the end of the year in the budget, how can you place it in the reserves so that you have the ability to do things going forward in the future? So that's what we have done, like all school districts try to do, to try to give themselves some protections going forward, and also in anticipation of maintenance projects or capital projects that they might like to be able to do. So as we've studied this issue of moving from a 9-period day to an 8-period day, this is one of the things that we've been sensitive to, is that in order to make this work at Ridge High School, we really felt as though we were going to need to have the ability to have another kitchen facility to feed more students in a single unit lunch period. And we were concerned that we might need more classroom space. So if you've been paying attention, you know that last year we had a consultant come. That consultant analyzed with us. We spent many hours in the main office and all over Ridge High School, analyzing the master schedule at Ridge and looking at this room issue, knowing that we might want to take 9 pounds and squeeze it into an 8-pound bag. And sure enough, at the end of the presentation, the consultant said to us, you know, I really think you're going to need 5 to 10 more classrooms, and you're going to need a way to feed the students. So we felt affirmed and felt good at having gone through the details of the master schedule, sort of with a third party, an outside set of eyes. And so that kind of brings us to where we are now, which is that we are in the process of trying to have an addition done to Ridge High School that would do two things. It would give us some more classroom space, and it would give us another kitchen so that we could produce more food, right? So we wanted to be able to cover those two hurdles. And although it's not presented here in this presentation tonight, I can tell you that we are almost ready to go out to bid, which means that we have a bid package for contractors to take a look at and come back to us and say, well, I think that I could build this project of 4 more classrooms with a small fifth, small instruction room on the second floor, and directly below that, a kitchen servery to produce more food and help you serve more food so that you could have the opportunity to run your new schedule and make it work such that that 9 pounds is going to just fit into the 8-pound bag and get that master schedule to work. Okay, so that is the idea. It's been going on for several years, and we're very pleased to be getting closer and closer to the point where we can try to make this work. So that brings us to tonight, where I asked Mr. Kraus and Mr. Fackelman if they could give us a progress update, because we really want to make sure that this, again, not to beat a dead horse here, but we really want to make sure that these 9 pounds are going to fit into this 8-pound bag. So we said, look, let's run a mock master schedule, right? Let's imagine that we're taking all the requests that the students had done last spring, right, really last winter, all the requests that the students had made in order to build the current year's 9-period day schedule, right? Let's take those requests, put them into our student information scheduling software, right? And set up that software instead of running on a traditional 9-period day like we have now. Let's set it up to run on this 8-period day with the unit lunch in this rotating drop scenario. And let's see how it goes. So with that, I would like Mr. Kraus and Mr. Fackelman to tell us how it went when they worked on this. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian, and I'm joined by Mr. Fackelman. My name is Drew Kraus, the principal here at Ridge. As I look at these, actually, I've been before you on several occasions. First, I think describing different schedules to you, whether it's a modified rotating drop or an AB day, a traditional 8 or 9-period day. I've been before you talking about facility requirements and some of the strictures we have on facilities. I've been before you talking about feedback and data from our teachers and our students on site visits we did with this. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this, and this is just sort of the next iteration in the process. And as you can see from the slide up there, it says it's like building a house. And I'm initially just going to run down for you quickly how this house is really built, because as Mr. Markarian said, we're trying to take 9 periods and condense them into 8. And when you have something of that nature, a facility issue arises. But in terms of scheduling, I'm going to just run through the process real quickly for you to understand how this house is really built and how we come to where we are in creating a schedule. You know, sometime in the winter and early spring, we have our students, they meet with their school counselors to select courses of their, of their own choosing for whatever path they're on. And those are the student requests that are put in. Based on those courses that students select, supervisors are then given course tallies for particular courses. You may have 100 students who might be signed up for woodshop, let's say, something along those lines. Given that, there are sections that are created. Those sections are determined by student requests, as I've said, teachers who are available to teach a particular course, and some of that is a factor of certifications, and room availability. We can't run 10 sections of a given course if we have 2 rooms for that course. I mean, we only have 1 dance room. It's hard in 8, 9 periods to run 10 sections of dance. That's what I'm talking about. So sections are created. Following that, we begin to build. There's a process with our scheduling team to build. We load that information, the section information, the courses, the rooms, and our staffing into the Genesis program to start to build a schedule. We consider staffing, of course. Sometimes we have shared staff between ourselves and William Annan, which may require courses to run sometimes in the afternoon if the shared staff can only be here in the afternoon, or in the morning, vice versa. We have sort of special education things we have to look at, whether they're in-class support courses or, students there are courses that have a minimum or maximum required students that can be in there. Those are all the things that go into the build process when we do this as we build the schedule. And that takes time to look at. It takes a lot of meeting with supervisors and a lot of back and forth. Late spring, we try to put this all into the schedule builder. Make room adjustments where things can fit. Which rooms can be used for specific departments and courses. Can rooms be shared between courses or departments? Staff adjustments, I talked about certifications. Can a teacher teach a specific course? Can a teacher only be here in the afternoon or the morning because they're shared? There's a lot of problem solving that goes on. There's a lot of tweaking that goes on in order to build that ideal schedule. And we'll talk a little bit later about how that ideal schedule will load with students at a certain percentage to see if it was a good schedule and a good match. The last step after we build that schedule is to commit to that schedule, saying this is what we're going for, this is what we're going with, this is the best we're going to do with our schedule, where these courses fit, where they run during those periods, and the staff and rooms that are allocated to that schedule. After we commit that schedule, this is when, there's still a puzzle piece that has to be worked on, and that goes on in the summertime. In the summertime, we continue to fine-tune the schedule. Counselors work with looking at the schedule, seeing there are students that don't have full schedules. Continue to work with supervisor on specific department needs, staff conflicts, room conflicts, and tweaking the schedule throughout the summer until we're ready to go with it to release that schedule in late August. And of course, there is the phys ed piece, and I've talked to you during the summer about the option 2 piece and how that plays into it, and sometimes creates another strain on us in terms of the balancing of classes and the amount of study halls that are created by that option 2 piece, because students aren't allowed to substitute a course for option 2. They have to take a study hall instead. That being said, there's no vacancy left, right, in our building after we have this, and so we're a little bit tight at this point. That is really a rundown of how it goes from winter through the spring into the summer, the tweaking, the adjustments that go on, and there's an incredible amount of work and balancing that happens, and there's a lot of people involved to make this work. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Fackelman right now because he's the one that ran the data in these schedule builder for us, the data that we have from last year for our school. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So as Mr. Kraus said, we're in the process now. Once this is all done, it's that fine-tuning process. So when we commit to our schedule, after we build it, that's when a lot of what we had been doing for months, we now do, and that's what we're going to keep to make the student schedules in time for the start of the school year. So where we are with our scheduling update, Genesis provided us with a test site. So that test site is the exact same site of what we're using normally now, but we can't mess anything up. We were concerned, it's like, okay, you're going to give us the keys to the city, and if we change some parameters, are we going to mess the whole school up? They assured us, no, we're in a sandbox all by ourselves, so it's great. We have our own private server, it's nice. So we're working within that, and again, we're looking at making a variety of iterations. What can we do to create different mock schedules? We're using different room configurations. We're looking at departmental locations, specifically putting certain departments in certain wings of the building. So right now, we have some teachers that have a period in the 200 wing, and then the next period, they have to put on their skates and they have to get all the way down to the 700 wing. Sometimes that's a bit of a challenge, no different than students running from one end of the building to the other. So in our attempt to try to make a better environment for the students, for the teachers, we spoke with the supervisors and said, in your wildest dreams, if you could pick your wing where you want your department, what would you think? Took them no time at all to tell us exactly what they thought, which was great. And it's a conversation, sharing an office we all dream about and talk about repeatedly. So that was another iteration that we put in there. Ultimately, what is our goal? Our goal in creating a good schedule is to create the most full student schedules as we can. So when we go to that commit time, when we're getting ready to create everything in time for the opening of school, the higher percentage of full student schedules indicates to us that we're in very, very good shape. So that is ultimately our goal. So the chart, the boxes, kind of give you a little illustration as to what's good and what's maybe not so good and what could be great. So if we look at the pink box, because red is bad, when we look at the pink box, 75 to 80%, that's okay. You know, there's some hand scheduling, there's quite a bit of hand scheduling that has to go on, and that's something that happens in August, but you can make it work in some time. In the yellow, 85 to 90%, that's really good. We would be happy, Genesis would be thrilled. They told us, hey, if you can get into the low 80s, mid 80s, that would be great. You're really not going to get much higher than that. So there is still some hand scheduling, but not nearly as bad as the first box. 90 and above, you should own Genesis, because you're going to be a trainer for them, because you're doing really, really good. And it's very minimal what the hand scheduling is. So the bottom box, we've had test results ranging from 67% to above 90%. So let's understand what the 67% is. 67% represents our exact configuration that we have right now in the current school year dropped into a rotating drop schedule. If we kept all of our parameters, the same students, which we were using obviously for every iteration, the same amount of rooms, the same amount of teachers, we have 67% fill rate of full student schedules, which means we have a lot of work to do in the summer to move student schedules around to get everybody in. 67% isn't a grade any of us want to ever have, and we certainly don't want that in scheduling. The 90% and above, that represents adding more rooms, making departmental locations, making a variety of different changes to tweak what we want, where we want to go. So when we look to where we want to go, you're going to get to a point when you're doing your runs where it doesn't matter what changes you make, you get the same percentage over and over and over. That's when we know we've reached the point that there's nothing more we can do. We're going to commit and we're going to build that schedule and we're going to tweak it out from there. So we have some considerations, obviously, that we're always thinking about in building our schedules. So science, certainly a topic that comes up every once in a while. Science labs, as we've previously talked about in the summer meetings, the science labs would they would bump into the lunch periods for some of our science classes. That was one of the considerations. So if you have a science class that rotates to the period just before lunch, they would take the additional time from lunch and add to their labs. Considering that our AP science classes right now have double lab periods, we wanted to make sure we created an iteration that represented additional time for those AP classes. So just for the AP science classes, we added an additional lab period to that schedule. The other days of the rotation, students would get a study hall. So that was something that we looked to see what our results would line up with. Staffing, and we have a question mark next to that. We haven't gotten to the point where we're ready to talk to the supervisors and sit around the table and throw it all out and have everybody pick at it. We need to do that. We're going to do that at the right time, but we want to make sure we get all of our information. We'll then have a truer picture when Mr. Miziak speaks to us about how can it work with his science staff. Can it work with the variety of labs and everything else? And that's going to help us in understanding what we've done at this point. The department wings, I mentioned that earlier. That seems to have worked out pretty well, and we're hoping that's going to continue with a variety of runs that we're doing. Room needs, we looked at certainly department needs and certainly special education. The needs are very different, and we have to make sure that rooms are being allocated for an increase in enrollment, and we've incorporated those in some of our runs. Music has certainly come up, and it is our goal, our intimate goal to, personally me, to make sure that we maintain exactly what we have now in one form or another. So we're looking at what are our options there. Currently, as we all know, if you've been attending these meetings, lessons, instrumental music lessons and choral ensembles happen during lunch periods. So we're looking to see what options we have under a rotating drop. So now we are in what we're calling the analysis phase. We're looking at a lot of our iterations. We're still making some adjustments, and we're starting to look and try to weed out and see what we've learned from each one and what we can use to tweak and make additional adjustments. Part of that analysis review of the staff distribution. Where did the staff end up in the building? Where did the staff end up in their departments? Are they all over the place, or did we succeed in our goal to get them close together? We're going to commit to a schedule run in our little sandbox, and that's when we can really see exactly how much tweaking we're going to have to do. It's going to be our August, in getting ready for the start of the school year, so we'll have a better idea of that. We continuously work with Genesis. If it's 4 or 5 phone calls a day, sometimes they respond each and every time and say, hey, we'll talk to you later. And we're like, yes, you will. And so they're pretty good about that. We actually have a meeting later this week, and we're going to discuss some options that we can do and get their input as to how we can make things work a little better or not. We'll see what happens. As I said, we're going to share our findings with our administrator colleagues. And I think the biggest and the best thing that we can do to support our efforts is continue to talk to other school districts that are running this type of a schedule. Learn from them, take their advice, try to see if we can incorporate things that they wish they had, but they don't have the time or whatever. I think that's how we can learn the most about these schedules and go from there. You know, the initial slide was about, you noticed there was an architecture plan. Mr. Krause said that we started with like building a house. Our goal is to make sure we build a strong structure that has flexibility. If you're building a tall tower, the one thing about a tall tower, it has to have a little bit of sway in order to stand. We don't want to build a house of cards. We want to make sure we have the flexibility in our schedule that will help the students, help the staff, and just help an overall schedule and general environment of our school. So with that, we'll take any questions. Who's first?
Do you see any disadvantages with the idea of putting the departments in wings or things like that? Has there anything come up negatively? I mean, you said the teachers were pretty positive, like, we want this, but are there downsides?
Not having them in certain wings or having them there?
Having them, with a change.
The ideal is to definitely have them there, just so they can all work together as a group.
Yeah, I mean, in looking at what we have at this point, we certainly have to go a lot deeper. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of negativity to having a department in the same area. I mean, right now, we're looking, in some cases, the way our rooms are structured, what classes can we put together if we don't have enough rooms? Certainly, art, music, science rooms, tech ed, they all have dedicated classrooms. You're not really going to share anybody else in there. But the other 4 academic areas, maybe we're going to have some, not maybe, we do have some classrooms where world language and, say, social studies is in the same room, social studies and language arts. So having the opportunity to create silos, I guess maybe that's the right word, or wing where it's a department, it'll allow those departments to intermingle and collaborate and not be flying all over the building. That we might be able to have rooms that are a U.S. history room or an AP Psych, and now we're going to be able to take our resources and not have to spread them thin all over the place and having one good location that's accessible to everyone.
So this is something that's going to be an improvement over the current situation.
I think it is, yes.
Yeah, I'd agree
Unless
with that.
one's a teacher that's in 3 or 4 different
Yeah.
classrooms all over.
Yeah, I have a teacher who's in 4 classrooms, and she's great about it, but it's 4 classrooms. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So one of the concerns with these rates of like the fill rate or whatever you want to call it is it's obviously requires hand scheduling when it doesn't work out, but also, there's a certain percentage of kids that might not get their first choice classes, and the lower the rate is, the more chance that you can't make it work for them, even if you switch their schedule around by hand. So I know you had said, I forget whether it was at the curriculum meeting, what was the rate this year when we did it with our current schedule? Because I don't want people to think, we were 100% working, it was 100% the old way, and now we're going to have all these kids that can't get classes.
Yeah, when we committed to the schedule in August, end of July, August, we built 78%. That's how we committed this year's schedule. So there was a lot
above
of
that would be better as far as meeting with those student requests, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a C plus
Okay.
issue.
So I mean, it's not like we've ever had a schedule that we filled
No.